Look, I'll just add that what you say about Trump bill seems to me to be the case, whether or not he runs, whether or not he's in jail,
Oh,
he will
sure.
be the most
Mhm.
powerful, important figure in the party, and
And he's going to
all.
run. He's not going to be in jail. And if he's indicted, he'll run, incidentally. If he's in jail, he'll run. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's true.
and he's going to announce right after. I don't know, Carol has done probably reporting on this and knows more than we do,
Mhm.
but I think he will. I've always thought he would announce right after the election. I
Mhm.
said today somewhere else that I thought he should just announce on election day. I would actually be fairly clever. I think he would like get in every single story. If a
Yeah,
couple of his candidates win, he's there on election night taking credit. But I don't know how solid this reporting is that he'll announce a week later. But the degree to which Trump
it's
gets to be
hedged.
front and
Yeah.
center, the Biden White House will half of Biden's own mind, and his White House will say, "I've got to run again because I'm the only one who can beat Trump." The other half, and most Democrats outside the Biden White House will say, "Ugh, we need a fresh start and a generational turnover." But I'm curious if I could ask Carol, what do you think about that? Because that seems to be a very big. I mean, people sort of we're going to all heave a sigh of relief, just because it's over, and people are going to try to take a few days off on November 9th, and Trump's going to
Yeah.
announce right away, and there's going to be leadership elections in the House, and it's going to be total, and there could be chaos in some state capitals, and people are it's going to be crazy, I think.
Carol, let me ask you to add to that. Who do you see who would, if Biden doesn't run, if he's not the nominee, who would it be?
As the question that Democrats ask themselves. It's a question that the president himself in private meetings at fundraisers, and I've talked to people who've talked to him at various events, will walk people through. If not me, who? Is Kamala going to beat him? Is Buttigieg going to beat Trump? And so that's where the kind of exercise that he goes through and that Democrats go through and that they will be going through on Wednesday for sure. And our reporting is that Trump is going to announce before December, with the giant caveat that, having covered him during his time in office, he can change his mind on a dime, and he could run, or he might not run, or he might do a big event and just say hi, and there's no there, and so no one fully knows, but that's the expectation. And then that puts pressure on the White House and the president. Does he then try to declare earlier? Our reporting is that the president's going to file paperwork soon after the holidays. So, they're looking closer to January than later, like April, which is what President Obama did for his reelection. And does he try to move that up? Because Democrats are going to be asking those questions again. Should he run? Is he the best person? And one of the things that you're going to see, I was talking to somebody who was with the president at a fundraiser earlier this week, who said that, they're going to look at the polling, and it's going, when you match up Biden versus Trump, and then you match up, Kamala Harris versus Trump, it's Biden's going to come out as the one who looks, at least right now at this snapshot in time, as the candidate who's most viable. So that's the argument that he's going to make. Look, I've talked to people who think that the president would not run again if Trump didn't, that he's frustrated in the job. He obviously likes the job, but it's not the Washington he knows. He doesn't really understand it. He sees these guys in the Senate. They used to be his friends, and he says, who are these people? And he's obviously older. But if Trump is in the race, the belief among people close to the president is that he's in the race too. And I know I interviewed the first lady recently, and she's supportive of him running again, and he has the family behind him. And so it looks like it will be a matchup until it's not. I mean, he can always pull back, and Trump can always pull back too.
Just in thinking through also the next few weeks and months, but Trump will or won't be indicted, maybe in Georgia, but more importantly, I would say at the federal level. So then if he is, I mean, if the House is Republican, they will go totally crazy. They will impeach
Right.
Merrick
Mhm.
Garland. I mean, the Hunter Biden hearings will be on 6 sessions a week of that. And and that could be, who knows what they'll find there. But they'll try to defund parts of the Justice Department. I mean, it's going to be the degree of we thought 95 was dramatic.
It's going to be ugly.
Newt and
Yeah.
Clinton. I mean, it's going to make 95 look like a
nothing.
picnic, and it's going to be ugly every which way. And what is incidentally? What about this again? It gets back to Biden. If Trump's indicted, or is Trump going to take it like, oh well, that's it. There's the rule of law in this country. I've got to be very quiet, and I can't ask people to go
Yeah,
to
right.
go
I think
march
that's a
on the
rhetorical
to
question.
march
I
on.
don't think so.
There'll be a march on Washington with 1 million people marching on the justice. I'm very worried about like January
Yeah.
6th type things, and
Mhm.
then and then there'll be. Some people on the left will say, not ridiculously, well, wait a second, we can't just let them have the streets. We need to show support for the rule of law, and so the degree of just kind of to which people haven't quite, I think, internalized how ugly, as Carol said, the
How bad it
politics could
could
be.
be.
The governor used the term, revolution, and it does seem plausible. By I just mean, real sort of ongoing. January 6th was a deadline. If he's indicted, there's a year until he comes to trial, et cetera. It gets uglier and uglier. I just wanted to double back quickly on something I thought about while preparing for this episode on this farm team question and Kamala Harris, because we were just talking about governors. 4 years ago, we might have predicted that at this point we'd be looking at two, emerging superstars in the party. So it seemed, Beto O'Rourke and Stacey Abrams, and they're both now running for governor, and it looks like they're going to do worse. A, lose, and B, do worse than 4 years ago, notwithstanding being very attractive candidates in different ways. And that's, I think, another way of framing the continuing vitality or influence of Trumpism. If they were going to win Tuesday, they would immediately be top of the list for who displaces Biden and runs. And I think it seems more likely, I wonder if anyone disagrees, that they're just footnotes come Wednesday.
I think there's a better Democratic bench than people. If Gretchen Whitmer wins in Michigan by 6
Yeah.
points, which I think is quite likely, she will have won a state that Trump won in 2016 and that Biden won by 1.5 points in 2020. Pretty hard to say. And this is where I think the Biden people are slightly in a bubble. They think he's the only one who could beat Trump. Well, Whitmer's going to win Michigan by 6 points. Why exactly is it that if she would, it's not a presidential race and her opponent's not Trump. I understand that. But in principle, if the governor will have won in the same electorate that by a bigger margin than Biden. Josh Shapiro is going to win Pennsylvania by 10 points. Now, Mastriano is, again, weaker than Trump, but he will have won Pennsylvania. I think people are underestimating slightly the effect of election night itself. If Ryan wins in Ohio, which I think is sort of 1 and 3, 1 and 4, winning Ohio, a state Biden lost by 8 points. So not that any of those people necessarily would be the leading presidential candidate right away. But I think the notion of Biden's, and I say this as someone who supported Biden enthusiastically in 2020, so I like a lot of what he's done as president, but the notion that Biden's the only one who can beat Trump, he beat him. So, okay, he beat him and Hillary Clinton lost, so that's a fact. But I think, and I'm wondering if they start doing polls, incidentally, are we so sure that a Buttigieg-Whitmer ticket isn't as strong as a Biden-Harris ticket against Trump? I'm not sure of that, actually. So I think, Carol, it's interesting that it's interesting to see what they find when they start doing these polls. And again, I think everyone's been quiet, as they should have been if you're a Democrat, for the last 2 months, basically, about Biden and running again, and everyone's on board. But I do think that will change very quickly after Tuesday.
I agree. I think there are lots to see on both sides. I think you're going to see some Republicans, hopefully sane Republicans, who are going to win, who are suddenly going to become much more attractive. Maybe not. Nobody can overcome Trump within the Republican apparatus. There is no Republican Party. There's the cult of Trump, but they control the label right now, and they control the official process. But there are going to be other opportunities to get people on the ballot and to be able to put together a fusion ticket, the way the problem solvers are trying to do. Their focus right now. I think we're going to see a lot of different. If somebody like an Evan McMullin were able to pull it out in Utah, I'm afraid that polls show that that's not going to happen. But there's an independent who can win in a solidly Republican state. But we'll see. There are a lot of, Bill's absolutely right. There's so much we don't know that we will find out after the election of who's viable. Carol, I think you've probably got to see that too.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Whitmer, Shapiro, those are not names that are currently in that exercise that the president does with people he's trying to convince that he's the best person to run against Trump. And if you add them to the mix, particularly after Tuesday, it'll be interesting to see how they play, because one of the problems when I talk to Democrats that Democrats raise is, Kamala Harris, she's seen as the heir apparent. Does the president have to get behind her? And what does that look like? And it creates a lot of consternation among Democrats who think that she's just not very good as a candidate. She's not out there. She doesn't connect, with the American people in a way that they feel a nominee is going to need to do in order to beat Trump, and doesn't speak to voters that you may be able to peel away from Trump, or anyone who is running and wins the Republican nomination is still in the mold of Trump. So if you add those other names into the mix, I'd be curious to see how that shakes out and what the president and his team have to say about it.
Just one last point on this. I mean, there's often like someone who runs first who's a bit of a sacrificial lamb, and Gene McCarthy to Bobby Kennedy. If you want to, for us oldsters, if you want to think of a model for how this sometimes works. And I mean, Pritzker wants to run in Illinois. I don't think he's going to be the next president of the United States, but he's a billionaire and he's been a decent governor, and he could run and just say,
and Newsom wants to
Newsom really wants to run, and it's not quite my taste, but he is a capable politician, and he's the governor of California, which is not nothing. Polis in Colorado, I'm not sure if he really wants to run. He's also wealthy. That part will help, because if Trump will have Biden will have the apparatus behind him. I mean, these people aren't going to run against Biden. For me, the big question is on November 15th, do they start to say, I'm considering it. I respect President Biden, wonderful job. And of course, if he runs, it's a different story. But I think it's important that we all begin to think about generational change. And governors actually have, usual governor pitch they can make. I mean, I do think some of these, there'll be a little more of that than I think the Biden team is kidding themselves a little if they think that because everyone who's in Washington, basically, who's a good friend of Ron Klain and Anita Dunn and Biden himself, and they've known him for 30 years, because everyone is telling him, well, sir, if you decide to go again, of course, everyone's going to recede. I don't think it's going to quite feel like that. I'm not saying they're going to run, but I think there'll be much more people sticking their heads up and floating ideas about, isn't it time for someone for a fresh face? And that could have an interesting dynamic of its own.
The fresh face is going to be a thing on Wednesday.